Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. You've probably heard of work-life balance, but have you heard of work-life integration? This is something that is relatively new, especially when compared to work-life balance, which has been around for quite a long time. When we look at work-life balance, we tend to think in terms of separating our work life and our non-work life, our personal life. And when this kind of separation takes place, oftentimes conflict is created where both domains, the work domain and the personal domain or the non-work domain, compete for time, energy, resources. But when it comes to work-life integration, a new way of looking at life in terms of work and personal life, it's more of a holistic approach, and it seeks to blend the personal and professional needs in such a way that we achieve compromise and cooperation that works for both the personal life and the work life. So that's the big difference. Again, work-life integration talks about or aims to have that blending in a holistic approach where we can work out personal and professional needs in terms of compromise and cooperation. So we have a win-win, as opposed to work-life balance, which is an old concept where work is separate from personal life and the two tend to compete. When we look at balancing life in general, especially for those who work for an employer, things have changed in the last several decades, really, and even more significantly so since the pandemic. More and more people have embraced remote work or hybrid work arrangements, and that in itself has truly changed the boundaries between our personal lives and our work life. And to a large degree, those boundaries have pretty much been erased, if for no other reason than working from home can truly get rid of those boundaries on our behalf, even if we're not trying to erase such boundaries between work and personal life domains. Boundaries are some of the biggest challenges that both employees and employers can encounter when we look at new ways of working, new ways of experiencing work, new places to work, remote work, hybrid work. It can be difficult for individuals to set boundaries in their new working location, even if they're working a hybrid type of arrangement or agreement. It can also be difficult for employers to set boundaries. Many employers have struggled with figuring out how to manage people remotely, how to appraise or decide how much work is getting done, how productive employees are, how much monitoring is required. So boundaries have been a relatively large challenge for both sides of the equation, for both the employer and the employee. There are increased pressures in remote work situations or hybrid work environments. We have technology that can be great or can sometimes fail and misbehave. The same technology can also turn from being a great tool to being a leash of sorts that does not allow us any freedom. There are many distractions, especially when working remotely or in a hybrid work environment. Those distractions come in all kinds of forms. Time management, of course, can also be a challenge, especially when it's a struggle. The other thing that we need to keep an eye on when it comes to the pressures of remote or hybrid types of work and creating a balance comes down to things like clear goals. What are your goals as an employee? What are the goals of your employer? It's much too easy to be vague about those goals or to forget about them altogether when we embrace a new way of working, such as hybrid work or remote work. The other thing is staying highly focused when needed. Now, super high focused is neither realistic nor is it required for the entire day, for the entire work day. However, there has to be a time and a place as needed where super high focus or high focus is what's happening in that employee's experience. That's when things such as distractions, time management, and technology, especially unruly or failing technology, can be extra problematic and present undue pressures on the employee and the employer. And of course, last but not least on my list of what I wanted to mention here are things such as unnecessary meetings. We all know the wasteful nature of unnecessary meetings when done on site, but they can be just as wasteful and frustrating when they take place in remote situations. So when we look at trying to find a balance, trying to find integration between work life and personal life, these are some of the challenges that many people, most people, are facing today. What are some of the strategies that we could talk about in terms of achieving that integration, that true balance that goes beyond work-life balance, but rather focuses more on the work-life integration? Well, first and foremost, time management. And time management has been on the forefront of conversation in terms of work experience for many, many years. This is something that is critical for both the employee and the employer. But beyond time management, I'd like to bring your attention to something else, which is energy management. Time management focuses on tasks, specifics, check-off lists, and if you think about it, time is a resource that we cannot renew. We cannot get it back. Once it passes, it's done. We also have to be cognizant of energy management. This is especially important because energy, unlike time, is a resource that can be regained, that can be found back into your list of resources or available resources. So beyond time management, which is important, of course, think also in terms of energy management. What do you need to do as an individual, and what does an organization need to do to encourage and promote healthy energy management and energy regeneration for the individual employees? Something else that will be helpful for achieving that integration between work and personal life are things such as flexibility and being able to prioritize tasks. When we get too rigid with things, whether it's our schedule, whether it's our list of things to do, our tasks, or how we do things, it can become stressful. It can limit us in what we can achieve when and how. So it's incredibly important that we allow for flexibility and the ability to prioritize tasks. Everything cannot be number one on our list of priorities, and we cannot be so rigid that nothing can ever be adapted or changed or moved around as may be required for a situation or for that moment. At the same time, we don't want to be so flexible that we lack structure. So it's not difficult to see how flexibility really plays such an important role, especially as we explore the idea of integrating work and personal lives in such a way that both find a satisfactory fulfillment on all levels, as much as possible, as often as possible. The other thing that is important to remember is that work-life integration is going to be different for everybody. It's going to maybe look similar for a lot of people, but there will be differences. First and foremost, there will be differences based on the business itself, on the company, on the company's culture, even things like the business model. Those will all come into play when we consider what will work-life integration look like. Things such as demographics, those will play a role. And also, it will come down to some degree to individual employees. So when we look at achieving integration, we absolutely have to be cognizant of all of those variables that will come into play. And while integration may look similar between different companies, between different organizations, between different people, it will not be exactly the same. We have to allow for those differences in order to account for the different variables that come into play. And as is often the case, the organization plays an important role in terms of support and being able to foster and promote achieving work-life integration for their employees, for their workforce. So what are some of the things that an organization can do? First and foremost, let's talk about exploring benefits. Benefits have been a topic of conversation for a long time, and it's a topic that changes over time. The reality is that benefits of today, or at least what are considered valuable benefits of today, are not the same as what was considered to be valuable, let's say 50 years ago, or maybe even 20 or 30 years ago. And yes, there will be differences between individual employees in terms of what they value, what kind of benefits are important to them. But we also have to look at the big picture of the shifting of what benefits are truly valuable to today's employee. This is something that both the organization and the employees have to come together to explore. An organization can put their best effort into trying to determine what will appeal to their employees, but if they never get the employees' feedback, those efforts might be in vain. And at the same time, the employee is just as responsible for communicating to the employer what kind of benefits will truly be valuable to them. So an organization has the responsibility and opportunity of exploring benefits that will really truly appeal to their workforce, but the individual employee has to play along. They have to participate in that for it to be a truly meaningful effort. Doing things such as encouraging flexible schedules are important when it comes to what an organization can do in a way of supporting the integration of work and non-work worlds for their employees. It could be things such as 4-day a work week, which is big for many people, maybe flexible hours, flexible schedules, being able to focus on accomplished tasks or projects rather than the number of hours worked. All of those things can be tremendous when it comes to finding that integration, going beyond the simplistic balance between the separate worlds of work and personal life, but rather truly exploring and mastering that integration. An organization can also focus on providing wellness resources, and that could mean different things to different people. But wellness resources should have one thing in common. They should all have the goal, the aim of getting employees to be well and to stay well over time. When we look at organizations and organizational health, we have to very much so consider employee health, and that means physical health, emotional health, psychological health. When an employee is healthy and well and balanced, they are going to be engaged and they are going to be more productive. So it is absolutely critical and truly a no-brainer for an organization to focus on providing wellness resources as a way of supporting the integration of work and life as something that can exist in harmony rather than two opposing forces fighting for time and resources. As you can see, when it comes to work-life integration, this is all about fluidity between work and personal life. It's all about being able to adapt and collaborate and cooperate in such ways that both sides feel valued and both sides feel like they're on the winning end of their efforts and the company's efforts. And while it may be a different process, something different than the traditional work-life balance that has been around for such a long time, the reality is that this is truly a much more current and realistic approach to finding that balance between our personal and our work lives. And this is especially important as more and more people embrace hybrid work or remote work. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. Most people are familiar with the concept of work-life balance, and it's a concept that has been around for a very long time, but it has become outdated. This concept separates work and life and often leads to conflict. It often leads to competition for time and resources from that one individual. Both sides, the work side and the personal side, are competing for the same things, whereas work-life integration, a newer concept, has a more holistic approach that seeks to blend the personal and professional needs in such a way that it focuses on compromise and cooperation instead, allowing more of a win-win for both sides. The rise of remote and hybrid work arrangement have, to a large degree, erased the boundaries between work and home and has re-energized the debate over that balance between our work domain and our personal life domain. Of course, there are some difficulties that can present themselves as we try to find that integration and that perfect balance. Everything from boundaries to pressures to unclear goals. But as is the case with most, if not all things, there are things that we can do to make it better. Time management, energy management, flexibility, and being able to prioritize tasks are key. And let's not forget that we have to be able to understand not every organization will have the same kind of work-life integration plan. Things will vary by culture, business model, and even individual needs. And of course, organizations have a tremendous responsibility and opportunity to support their workforce, to support their employees in achieving and maintaining that work-life integration. Everything from exploring benefits, valued, meaningful benefits, to encouraging flexible schedules and providing wellness resources. The organization has a great deal of power to either support integration in such a way that it is achieved and maintained, or to be detrimental to the entire process. As the week unfolds, I encourage you to consider your own experiences and think about whether your work and life domains are currently viewed or approached or managed through the old way of thinking in terms of work-life balance, or if you have truly started to integrate the idea, this new concept or newer concept of work-life integration. Think about which one you are more familiar with, which one you're experiencing and embracing in your own work-life experience, and what can you do to make that experience better? What ideas and tips can you take away from today's episode so that you are more focused on this holistic approach of work-life integration and are able to move away from work-life balance, which is more about conflict and separation? For those of you who experience my podcast in an audio-only version, I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, where you can find the video version of the podcast. And while you're there, I encourage you to check out some of the other videos which focus on stress management. So go to YouTube and look up Stress Free with Dr. G. The link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.